Hey, everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
You know, we always like to pick a topic that everyone can relate to.
Something practical. Yeah.
Exactly. And today we're going to talk about something that's super important for anyone who wants to grow anything.
Whether you're a serious gardener or a farmer or even just have a few pots on your balcony.
Right. It's all about getting the ground ready before you even think about planting.
Yeah, getting that foundation right is crucial for healthy plants.
Absolutely. And we've been digging into some fascinating research on this topic.
Lots of great insights from folks who've spent years setting up successful farms, especially those amazing date palm plantations.
Oh, yeah. Those guys really know their stuff.
And they've got some clever techniques for working with different types of soil and making sure those palms thrive.
And we're also going to look at some sustainable farming methods that can help anyone grow food more effectively.
So our mission today is to equip you with the essential knowledge about preparing your land for planting.
We want to give you a clear understanding of the key things to consider without overwhelming you with technical jargon.
Yeah, we want to make this practical and easy to understand.
So let's dive right in. Why is all this prep work before planting so important? I mean, it's just dirt, right? Can't you just stick a seed in and hope for the best?
We could try that, but you'd be missing a crucial step.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the thing is, what you do before you plant has a huge impact on how well your plants grow in the long run.
So you're saying it's not just about the seed itself, but about creating the right environment for it to grow.
Exactly. Think about planting something like a date palm tree.
Oh, yeah, those are meant to last for ages, right?
Absolutely. They can live for decades. So if you don't get the ground right from the start, those initial problems can become really difficult to fix later on.
I guess it's kind of like building a house on a shaky foundation.
Precisely. It might look okay at first, but it's not going to be stable in the long term.
That's a great analogy. So it's all about creating a solid foundation for healthy growth. So where do you even begin with all this prep work? Say you've got a piece of land in mind. What's the very first thing you should be thinking about?
The first thing you need to consider is whether that piece of land is even suitable for what you want to grow.
Ah, so it's about choosing the right spot to begin with.
Yeah, experts call it field selection.
Yeah,
And trust me, this step can save you a lot of headaches down the road.
I can imagine. So what are some of the red flags you should be looking out for when assessing a potential planting site?
Well, one of the most crucial factors is water availability.
Obviously, plants need water to survive.
Right. But it's not just about having any water. It's about having a reliable source of good quality water.
So what do you mean by good quality water?
Good quality water means water that doesn't have too much salt or other minerals that could be harmful to plants.
Ah, I see. So too much salt is a bad thing for plants.
It can be, especially for plants that are sensitive to it.
So how can you tell if water has too much salt?
Sometimes you can tell by taste, but it's best to get it tested.
And what about the amount of water? How much is enough?
Well, that depends on the type of plants you want to grow and the climate you're in.
So some plants need more water than others.
Exactly. Date palms, for example, they need quite a lot of water, especially when they're fruiting.
So you need to make sure you have a consistent and abundant water supply.
And you also need to think about how you're going to get that water to your plants.
Ah, yeah, like if you're going to be using irrigation.
Precisely. You need to factor in the cost and the logistics of setting up an irrigation system.
So water is a big one. What else should you be considering when you're checking out a piece of land?
Another critical factor is soil depth.
Soil depth. Why is that so important?
Well, for one thing, plants need space for their roots to grow.
Okay, that makes sense. The deeper the soil, the more space for roots.
Right. And especially for plants that grow tall and have a lot of fruit, like those date palms, they need a strong root system to anchor them and support all that weight.
Otherwise, they might topple over.
Exactly. But soil depth also affects drainage and how effectively salts can be leached from the soil.
Leaching.
Yeah, leaching is the process of washing away excess salts from the soil.
Ah, so if the soil isn't deep enough, those salts might accumulate and harm the plants.
Precisely. And speaking of soil, we also need to consider the quality of the soil itself.
So what makes for good quality soil?
Well, good quality soil is well drained, has a good structure, and contains the right nutrients for plant growth.
Okay, so break that down for me. What do you mean by well-drained?
Well-drained soil allows water to pass through it easily without getting waterlogged.
So it's like a Goldilocks situation, not too wet, not too dry.
Exactly. And the structure of the soil refers to how the particles are arranged.
I see, so it's about how loose or compact the soil is.
Right. A good soil structure has plenty of air spaces, which are important for root growth and the activity of beneficial microorganisms.
Interesting. And what about the nutrients? What kind of nutrients do plants need?
Plants need a variety of nutrients, including nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Those are the big three, right?
Yeah, they're essential for healthy growth and development.
So how can you tell if the soil has enough of these nutrients?
The best way is to get a soil test.
A soil test, what's that?
A soil test analyzes the nutrient content of your soil and tells you what's lacking.
Ah, so it's like a blood test for your soil.
Pretty much. And based on the results of the soil test, you can add amendments to improve the soil fertility.
So you might need to add fertilizers or other organic matter.
Exactly.
So we've talked about water, soil depth, and soil quality. Anything else crucial to consider when choosing a good spot for planting?
Yes. We can't forget about soil salinity and acidity.
We touched on salinity a bit when we talked about water quality. What exactly are saline soils?
Saline soils have a high concentration of soluble salts.
Soluble salts meaning they dissolve in water?
Yes, exactly. You can often identify them by a white crust on the surface of the soil.
And are these saline soils always a bad thing?
They can be very problematic for many plants, especially those that aren't salt tolerant.
So are date palms salt tolerant?
Date palms are actually quite tolerant to salt compared to many other crops.
That's interesting. So they can handle a bit of salt in the soil.
Yes, they can even survive in soils with up to 3% salt.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. But I guess there's a limit even for date palms.
Of course. If the salt level gets too high, even date palms will struggle to grow.
So what about alkaline soils? How are they different from saline soils?
Alkaline soils have a high pH, which means they're more basic.
And what causes soil to become alkaline?
Several factors can contribute to alkaline soil, including low rainfall, high evaporation rates, and the presence of certain minerals in the soil.
And are alkaline soils also bad for plants?
They can be. High pH can interfere with nutrient availability and make it difficult for plants to absorb essential minerals.
So both saline soils and alkaline soils present challenges for growing.
That's right, and it's important to understand the specific conditions of your soil before you start planting.
So what can you do if you find yourself with salty or alkaline soil?
Well, there are a few things you can do.
Like what?
One option is to improve drainage.
We talked about that before, right? Getting the water to flow through the soil more easily.
Exactly. Good drainage can help to flush out excess salts.
And how do you improve drainage?
Adding organic matter to the soil can help improve drainage.
Ah, so that compost or manure we talked about earlier comes in handy again.
Yeah, it can really make a difference.
So improving drainage is one option. What else can you do?
Another option is to leach the soil.
Leaching. You mentioned that earlier. Remind me what that is again.
Leaching is basically flooding the soil with good quality water to wash away the salts.
So you're kind of diluting the salt concentration.
Precisely. And for alkaline soils, you might need to add amendments like gypsum or sulfur to help lower the pH.
So it sounds like dealing with salty or alkaline soil can be quite a process.
It can be, but it's definitely worth the effort if you want to ensure healthy plant growth.
Okay, so let's say we've chosen our land and we have a good understanding of the soil. What's the next step in preparing the ground for planting?
Well, once you've got your location and soil sorted, the next step is to prepare the land physically.
What do you mean by physically prepare?
This involves any actions you need to take to get the field ready for things like irrigation and planting.
Like clearing the land and removing obstacles.
Exactly. You might need to clear out any existing vegetation, remove rocks or stones, and level the ground if necessary.
So you're essentially creating a clean slate for planting.
That's a good way to put it.
And would you typically install the irrigation system at this stage?
Yes. The irrigation system is usually installed after the initial land clearing and preparation.
And I guess the type of irrigation system you choose depends on a variety of factors.
Absolutely. It depends on things like the size and shape of your land, the type of plants you're growing, and the availability of water.
So it's a pretty customized decision.
It is.
So we've cleared the land, installed the irrigation. What about soil improvement? Is that something you do at this stage as well?
Yes. Soil improvement often happens around the same time as the initial land preparation.
And what are some common ways to improve the soil?
One of the most important ways to improve soil is by adding organic matter.
That seems to be a recurring theme. Why is organic matter so beneficial for soil?
Organic matter is like magic for soil. It improves soil structure, water retention, nutrient availability, and even helps to suppress diseases.
Wow, it's like a multivitamin for your soil.
Exactly. And it's especially important in areas where the soil is poor or has been depleted by intensive farming.
So where do you get organic matter from?
You can get organic matter from a variety of sources, such as compost, manure, cover crops, and green waste.
And I guess the best type of organic matter depends on your specific needs.
Yes, that's right.
So we've talked about adding organic matter. What else can you do to improve the soil?
Well, if you have salty soil, you might need to take steps to remediate that.
Remediation meaning fixing the salt problem.
Exactly. As we discussed earlier, this could involve improving drainage, leaching the soil, or adding amendments like gypsum.
So it's a bit of a detective game figuring out the best approach for your specific situation.
It is. But don't worry, there are plenty of resources available to help you along the way.
Okay, so we've chosen the land, prepared it physically, and hopefully improved the soil. What's the last thing you do before actually putting those plants in the ground?
One of the final steps is preparing the individual planting holes.
Planting holes. So you're not just planting directly into the prepared soil.
It's often best to prepare individual holes, especially for larger plants, like trees and shrubs.
Why is that?
Preparing individual holes allows you to customize the planting environment for each plant.
How so?
You can amend the soil in each hole with the specific nutrients and organic matter that the plant needs.
Ah, that makes sense. So it's like giving each plant its own little personalized spa treatment.
Exactly. You can also use the planting hole as an opportunity to further leach any excess salts from the immediate root zone.
So you're essentially creating the perfect little microclimate for each plant.
Precisely.
And what's the recommended size for these planting holes?
Well, that depends on the size of the plant you're planting.
Okay, so bigger plants need bigger holes.
Makes sense. Right. But as a general rule of thumb, you want the hole to be at least twice as wide as the root ball of the plant.
Root ball?
Yeah, the root ball is the mass of roots and soil that comes with the plant.
Ah, I see. So you're giving those roots plenty of room to spread out.
Exactly.
And once you've dug the hole and amended the soil, do you plant the plant right away?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's a good idea to water the hole thoroughly before planting.
Why is that?
This helps to settle the soil and ensure good contact between the roots and the surrounding soil.
So you're essentially pre-watering the planting hole.
That's right.
Wow, it's amazing how much thought and preparation goes into planting.
It really is. But remember, the more effort you put in the beginning, the better your chances of success.
So to recap, getting your land ready for planting is a multi-step process that involves careful planning and execution.
And it's an investment that will pay off in the long run with healthier, more productive plants.
It's like the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly. By taking the time to prepare your land properly, you're setting yourself up for success.
This has been a really insightful conversation. It's clear that successful growing starts long before you actually put anything in the ground.
Absolutely. It all comes down to understanding your land, your soil, and the needs of your plants.
And speaking of understanding, I'd like to leave you with a thought to ponder. How might understanding the specific conditions of your own garden or land and preparing it thoughtfully lead to surprising improvements in what you can grow? What small step could you take today to learn more about your local soil? That's something to consider until our next deep dive.
Until next time, happy growing, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.